Okay. And share. All right, for the people on Zoom, do you see my screen?
Sure do.
Yes.
Yes, Simon.
Okay. Okay, beautiful. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, so there is 30 plus paragraphs on this agreement, all right? And I'm going to scroll all the way down to the last page of the RPA. I'm going to reverse engineer this, okay? So if you go all the way to the very end of the purchase agreement, there's a lot of language in here, right? A lot of paragraphs, and it's like reading a book, right? But once you get to the very end of the document, okay, which is this form right here, okay, 17 out of 17. 17 pages, okay, 17 pages. When I started my real estate career back in the mid-90s, there was only 6 pages. 6 pages, literally. And Jimmy, I know you've been here for a while. You probably had two pages. Yeah. 17 pages. And I can tell you, moving forward 5 years from now, 10 years from now, this 17 page is probably going to be 22 pages, right? As real estate revolves, changes, lawsuits, things happen, added information, language is taken, removed, or added into the contract, but it keeps getting bigger, bigger, and bigger. Okay. So I wanted to start off with 17 pages, right? Now, the last page is really the confirmation page, right? This is where the real estate broker section, right? Who are the parties involved? But it also has a section here where it talks about escrow holder acknowledgement, right? Once you have an executed agreement, that's when both the buyer, both the seller have signed off on this form or any counteroffers, then escrow will ultimately get a copy of this, and then they put their seal of approval, right, or approval on this, stating the fact that they have acknowledged, right? If you read what it says that the escrow holder acknowledges receipt of a copy of this agreement. If checked, a deposit in the amount of whatever that amount is, counter offers, right? So this is again a timestamp of what the escrow must do in order to be in compliant with it, right? It says how many counter offers, right? If it's one counter offer, two counter offers. I can tell you from personal experience dealing with offers. Usually an offer is submitted, a seller counteroffer is sent, and then either another buyer counteroffer is sent before it gets accepted. If it's a multiple counteroffer, then it could be 3 to maybe 5 different counteroffers before we get an accepted agreement, right? Escrow has to acknowledge, and this is where they put all of their information here, okay? Um, and that's confirmation from their end. Also on the very end of it, it says presentation of offer, agent or seller initial, seller brokerage firm presented this offer to the seller. Okay, this is an acknowledgement that says to the buyer's agent that this offer was presented. Okay, and here's the confirmation of that acceptance. Okay, now if we go up a little bit, this page is intentionally left blank, right? And the reason they leave these blanks, and you'll see through the purchase agreement that there'll be some blanks, is because in the near future, there's probably going to be added language in here, okay? Now, this section, I want you to also pay attention because a lot of agents fail to provide this. It says offer not accepted, okay? No counter offer is being made. The offer was not accepted by the seller, okay? How many times have you been on the other side and you get no answer from the agent? Okay, and what I mean is by the listing agent. You're calling, you're texting, you're emailing, nothing. The listing agent goes radio silence on you. And now you're kind of in a mix, trying to explain to the buyer is like, I don't know what's going on. our offer is about to expire and we still don't have an answer if they're going to accept, counter, or reject. Now, on the other side of the table, as a listing agent, folks, what you do need to understand is be proactive. If you know and your seller know that they're not going to consider this offer because of price, terms, and conditions, then do the right thing. Send it back and say, look, we rejected your offer. We're not accepting your offer. And here's the proof that we are not moving forward with your offer. And in peace of mind, I'd rather get a rejection instead of no call, no text, or no email. It shows one, your professionalism, that you actively received an offer, acknowledged the offer, presented the offer, and the seller has declined your offer. And now all you're doing is receipt of that and sending it to the buyer's agent. That'll squash any issues because you've done your part. Agents fall short and don't do this. They will say, well, that offer is too low. I don't even want to take it. And I get it. Maybe the seller is insulted with the offer that was brought upon you, right? It's okay. Don't get the emotional aspect of it. Be professional and do the right thing. If there is more than one agent representing the buyer, then the buyer agent would check this, and that means that there's two agents representing the buyer. Okay, why do you think that happens? Why do you think that there's two agents working with a buyer? Hmm? Say again? Yeah, but this is not a co-list. This is an offer. Why would you need two agents involved working with the buyer?
I had a situation like that. Good morning, Simon. It's Susie. I just
Hi.
had I had a situation like that when they're divorced.
Okay. Perfect. It
Yeah.
can be a divorce situation where one of the sellers, excuse me, one of the buyers, or well, let me take this back. Uh, the reason, and yeah, that's more of a seller situation, right? Where the divorcees and the husband and wife are not getting along, and you usually get two agents involved, right? One is working for the buyer, one is working for the seller. But in this case, as a buyer submitting an offer, why would you have two agents, right, working for the buyer, right? Well, maybe it's a partnership. Maybe it's a mentor and a mentee, right? And the mentor has to oversee the mentee's transaction, but wants to be involved in it. Or maybe they're part of a team and this is part of their policy and procedure that this particular agent is going to be part of this transaction with the other agent, right? Or maybe it's, one is going out of the country, right? And someone will be stepping in while the other person is on vacation for 2, 3 weeks, so on and so forth, then you want to put, right? Or maybe it's just the dynamics that you have, you feel more comfortable working with someone and you want to bring them into the transaction. So it's typical avenues of how we see when working with the buyer that, the beautiful thing is that they have the ability to work two agents. Yes,
Actually, this section here for D, this is talking about seller signature. Steve.
thank you. Yeah,
But just for
yeah,
clarification,
for clarification, I apologize, but yes, this is in case you have multiple buyers and sellers on here. So I sincerely apologize, but there is a section here that it does allow, and thank you for having that good eye, Steve. You're top notch here. All right, so the next is the entity, right? And in paragraph 34, it talks about the acceptance, right? The acceptance of the offer. And it says the following, folks. Seller warrants that the seller is the owner of the property or has the authority to execute this agreement. Seller accepts the offer and agrees to sell the property on the above terms and conditions. Seller has read and has acknowledged receipt of a copy of this agreement. And this agreement is the purchase agreement, right? And authorize the agent to deliver a signed copy to the buyer. Seller accepts is subject to the attached counter offer. So after receiving this offer, the seller has some options here, right? And those options is, we'll put you in a backup offer, or we're going to counter you, right? If it's a single counter offer, which is the SCO, or the seller multiple counter offer, SMCO, or if it's a entity, seller notes if paragraph is completed, if it's a representative capacity signature disclosure form, typically if it's a corporation or a trust, so on and so forth, and then that information is there. Now, an acceptance. What is an acceptance? Okay. An acceptance is, Steve, and maybe you can charm in on that because I know you're very in tune to the purchase agreement. So what is an acceptance?
Acceptance is when the last get signatures. Excuse me, when the last.
So I mean, we
offer-
can't hear. Is it possible to give a microphone or something?
Yeah, come up here, Steve. Thank you.
All right,
I got Steve here. Now
All
you
right.
get to see him too.
there we go. An acceptance is when the last offeror has an offer accepted by the last offeree. Now, if that sounds kind of foreign to you guys, that I'm using offeror and offeree, it's because those are legal terms. Because when a buyer ends up making an initial offer, they are referred to in legal terms as the offeror, the maker of the offer. If the offer at that point is 100% acceptable to the seller, both on price and terms, and the seller wants to accept that offer, that seller then is referred to as the offeree, and they can then sign the offer. Once that offer is signed, that is then a legally binding acceptance at that point, provided that information that the seller has signed that offer has been communicated back to either the buyer directly or the buyer's agent, that there has been a full loop of communication that is referred to as the meeting of the minds, that all parties now understand that the offer under price and terms have been agreed to by the seller. But now, let's now take the example of that offer that was initially written by the buyer, that either there was price or terms that was not acceptable to the seller. And the seller now wants to issue out a counteroffer. Well, what takes place now is they are virtually flipping hats. The seller now becomes the offeror, the maker of the counteroffer, and the buyer now becomes the offeree. And it works the same way. You know, if then the price and or terms put in that counteroffer is acceptable to that buyer, okay, then the buyer signs it, and then legal acceptance is once it is then communicated now back to the seller's agent and or sellers. Okay. It used to be that we also on our contract had a portion of the contract called confirmation of acceptance. We no longer have that on our contracts, okay? Because all it was a written formality to actually validate that communication of that acceptance had taken place. It's still important whenever you're the last agent to still get that communication documented, typically done either in an email and or text, saying, congratulations, my client, the seller or the buyer accepted your offer or the counter offer. So hopefully that clears that up for a little bit. Any questions?
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Very
Steve.
good.
Appreciate it.
Very good. We'll follow it, finish it up with a text.
Well, either email and or text. Absolutely.
Yeah, so going, and thank you again, Steve, for providing us with a understanding of how an acceptance works. I want to go into the section where it talks about the definition, because I think a lot of agents fall short of understanding, and a lot of your answers are with the definitions. And then we'll dive deep into the liquidated damage, mediation, and then the arbitration disputes. But this is where I want to focus on right now is the section here, okay? 25. If you do anything, go to this section because all of your answers will be right here on the definitions, okay? So it says the following, definitions and instructions. The following words are defined terms in this agreement and shall be indicated by the initial capital letters throughout the agreement and have the following meaning whenever used, okay? It goes back to what Steve was saying, section A. Acceptance means the time that the offer or final counteroffer is fully executed in writing by the recipient party and is delivered to the offer party or the party's authorized agent. Okay, that's what it means. B goes into agent, means the broker, salesperson, broker associate, or any other real estate license under the brokerage firm identified in paragraph 2B, which is on the very first of the page. It gives you the listing agent's brokerage, the name of the agent, and also the buyer's brokerage and buyer's agent that's representing the buyer, right? Section C talks about agreement. Means the document and any counteroffers or any incorporated addendums or amendments collectively forming the binding agreement between the parties. What this means is that, yes, the purchase agreement, there's counteroffers, but there may be additional stuff that is added to these terms and agreements. So therefore, everything is now incorporated into these documents. D, as is. Condition seller shall disclose known material fact and any defects as specified in this agreement. Buyer has the right to inspect the property and within the time specified. Request that the seller make repairs or take any corrective actions or exercise any contingency cancellation rights in this agreement. Seller is only required to make repairs specified in this agreement or as otherwise agreed. Meaning, all properties are sold in as is condition, right? Seller doesn't have to do anything as long as the seller discloses any issues with the property, what we call material fact. Yes, okay. Any known issues regarding the property. If the seller knows about something, they need to disclose it, right? And that's where you provide this information and the buyer then does their due diligence and determines if they're going to continue with the process, ask for repairs, ask for credit, ask for a price reduction, or back out of the deal. Those are some of the options. Authorized agent means an individual real estate license specified in the real estate broker section. So whatever agent that you put up there, that is considered the authorized agent on behalf of the client. Okay. F goes into the California Association of Realtors form, means the most current version of the specified form. This form in particular is June 2025. This is the most current one. Make sure that you have the most current version. From reference and other comparable from agreed to by the parties. Okay. G goes into close of escrow. Including the close of escrow means the date the grant deed or other evidence of transfer of title is recorded for any real property or the date of delivery of a document evidence the transfer of title for any non-real estate property transaction. Okay. So the close of escrow is an official recording of that grant deed. That's when we transfer of ownership happens. Copy means a copy by any means, including photocopies, faxes, and electronic, right, which is emails, right? Is a text message part of that copy? Absolutely, it is. Yeah, that's considered a copy as well. Now, this is the one that a lot of people get a little bit confused is the counting of days, okay? Yeah, everyone calls and says, well, Simon, when are we supposed to release contingencies and all this fun stuff, right? I think this is probably one of the biggest changes that happen is all of this additional language was put into counting days. And it says the following. It's done as follow unless otherwise agreed, right? Everything has to be agreed upon. If it's agreed upon, it's what you have on the contract. If you alter that, then that's something that both parties do, right? And that's perfectly fine as long as you have mutual agreement afterwards. And it says, the first day after an event is the first full calendar date following the event and ending at 11:59 p.m. Everyone questions, well, when is this contingency cancels or expires, right? And everybody says, is it 5 o'clock? Is it 4 o'clock? No, it's 11:59 p.m. 11:59 p.m. What I like is this example that they provided here, folks, okay? And it says that as an example, if a notice to buyer to perform is delivered at 3 p.m. on the 7th day of the month, or acceptance of a counteroffer is personally received at 12 noon on the 7th calendar day of the month, then the 7th day is considered 0 days, meaning that anytime someone provides you with a document that same day, that is considered 0 day of a 2 day, of a 3 day, of a 5 day, of a 17 day. 0 day. That's what they're referencing. So today you receive a notice to perform. This is not day one, even though you received it at 6 in the morning or 3 in the morning, or gosh, 12 a.m. in the morning, doesn't matter. It's still considered a 0 day. Okay. It's the next following day that starts the timing, right, of that 2 or 3 day period to release a contingency or otherwise. Does that make sense? Okay. So for the purpose of counting days to respond to the notice to perform or calculate the close of escrow date of a contingency removal date on the 8th day of the month is day one for those same purposes, meaning 0 day today, and then the following day would be considered 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. Okay. Uh, 2, all calendar days are counted and established as the first day after an event. 3, all calendar days are counted in determining the date upon which performance must be completed, ending at 11:59 p.m. So if you know that it's a 3-day notice to perform as an example, and it is the 3rd day, you have till 11:59 p.m. to release that a condition. Okay. Then you're still in the game, or otherwise either party has the right to cancel depending on who is sending the notice to perform. Okay. All calendar days are counted and determined, and upon which is performance must be completed, right? At the last day of performance, scheduled performance day. Okay. And that's something that they added is the performance day. That was never part of the language in the past, and now they use that as part of the conversation and lingo that we talk about is the scheduled performance day. After acceptance, if the scheduled performance day for any act required by this agreement, including close of escrow, lands on a Saturday, Sunday, or a legal holiday, the performance party shall be allowed to perform on the next day that is not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday. Interesting. Allowance performance day, it says, and ending at 11:59 p.m. So what this means and what it tells me is, one, if a contingency falls in one of those weekends or holidays, it reverts to the next following calendar day, right? But also what it says here, and this is where they tweak it and changes, is the performance day, meaning that if a notice to perform is granted, all right, or given to you, I should say, and it falls on a Saturday, a Sunday, or a holiday, then that just reverts to the next calendar day. Interesting. That was not there before. the seller had the right to cancel if a notice to perform was on a Saturday or Sunday. Now, because they have that specific language that talks about performance, that means now that even a notice to perform, if it falls on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday, it reverts to the next calendar day, meaning business day. Interesting, right?
What's important, especially if you're, let's call it a listing agent working on behalf of your seller of a non-conforming buyer, releasing contingencies, just because the time frame has lapsed where the buyer's contingency is now due, you should have a discussion with your seller of the issuance of the notice to perform and the timing of it. Because you need to let your seller know if we delay on giving it, and if we give it here, we have a 3-day holiday, we have a weekend plus a Monday holiday. And so your 2 days to the default of 2 days to buyer to perform end up turning into 5 or 6 days that you're giving them.
Right.
So so what's important is for you to be aware as the agent within your discussion with your client. Okay, so that they, because dates can matter. Okay. So
Yeah.
the worst thing you want is for your client to say, well, why didn't you tell me about for us to do this earlier since we could have?
Yeah, perfect. All right, so just to piggyback on what Steve was saying here, it says that the performance on the next day that is not a Saturday, Sunday, or legal holiday, allowance performance day, and ending at 11:59 p.m. The legal holiday shall mean any holidays or optional bank holidays. Okay, so they throw that bank holidays as well. So if a bank is closed, then that technically is an argument that you can have if someone is trying to cancel on you. If it falls on that particular day that a bank is closed, then we can argue that fact as well. And it's under the Civil Code Section 7 and 7.1. Any holidays under government code, right? For the purpose of the close of escrow, any day that the recording office in the county where the property is located is closed, or any day that the lender or escrow holder under this agreement is closed. They added all this additional stuff, so you can have that armed negotiation. Hey, the escrow closed, right? If they're closed, they cannot perform their duties. Therefore, this is why this language is in here. Yes, sir.
Why did they add these? Were there a lot of discrepancies or are there a lot of issues with?
There's a lot of issues. Yeah, there's a lot of issues, and there's been a lot of mediations on arbitrations because the buyer believes they have the right. The seller says, no, you don't have the rights. We're going to cancel on you. So it's always been those issues about who is right and who is wrong. So now they've defined counting days so elaborate here that it's like, wow, this was never part of the conversation. But it's opened up a can of worms where a lot of people were having issues. And cancellations, well, I don't think it's cancel. I don't think it's appropriate to cancel based on this. So now the Department of, the California Association of Realtors has broken it down and had these attorneys look at this information and says, let's talk about what counting days really means. Okay, 100%. Absolutely, absolutely. But now it really dissects of what we can do, right? Before a cancellation falls on the weekend, we can cancel with that buyer and move on. Now this language of performance day is initiated, meaning now that it has to fall on the next business day or calendar day. In this case, would be on Monday. So it gives that buyer that extra time necessary to perform.
This is just a model, like this form.
This language has been here for at least about a year, maybe a year and a half. Yeah. But here's the thing, a lot of agents don't read these contracts and the definition, and this is why it's very important for you to kind of understand the scope of what these mean so you can now arm yourself, negotiate, and says, no, I have to disagree with you. Okay, based on what I read here and the information we have on the purchase agreement tells me otherwise. Okay. All right, so next it says, for the purpose of the close of escrow, any day that the recorder office, we talked about that located, we talked about that. Close of escrow is considered day 0 for the purpose of counting days. And seller is allowed to remain in possession if permitted by this agreement. Okay. Now we go into the days or days, right? Means calendar days or days. However, deliver of deposit to escrow is based on business days. So if you accept an offer on Thursday and it's 3 days, right? To deliver the earnest deposit, right? Well, based on days means calendar days is the delivery of a deposit, meaning that if it falls on a Saturday and Sunday, you have to allow the buyer till the next day, which would be on a Monday. You know, even though it's, wait a minute, it's 3 days, right?
In this case, three business days. Business day 1 is Friday, business day 2 is Monday, business day 3 is.
Right.
So
Simon,
Monday.
1 second.
You can have, so.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Question.
okay, I have a question. Okay, when you said a calendar day, my understanding is calendar day is it'll be like today. One day is today, the following day is another day instead of like 24, like a business day, 24-hour. Is that what it means?
So
I'm getting-
calendar day, yeah. So let me put some clarity to that. Calendar
Thank
day
you.
means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? 30-day calendar, 31-day calendar, right? But what it breaks it down is when it comes to counting of days, right? So if we have an acceptance today, so me and Jim, let's just say Jim represents the buyer, I represent the seller, and we accept our offer today, right? Today is Friday, right? Today would be considered 0 days of a calendar day period, meaning tomorrow would be the 30-day period. So tomorrow, Saturday, would be 1 day of a 30-day period. Okay. So every time something happens on that specific day, that is considered 0. 0. Okay. Offer acceptance, right? Contingency, notice to perform, the demand to perform as well, right? When the buyer or the seller cannot close and it's a specified date to close and that doesn't happen, then that's also considered 0 days of a 72 hours or 48 hours for notice to perform. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Say again?
That means that the really first day is Monday, not Saturday, Sunday.
For what? Yes.
The only part of our contract by default in the contract that references business days is for the buyer to deposit their funds into escrow. All other days in the contract reference calendar days. Okay. So escrow is calendar days, contingencies are calendar days. Okay.
Right.
I mean, we still can't hear anybody other than you.
Well, hold that thought, Steve. Hold that thought for a minute. I'll have Steve come back and explain it. Let me just get through this. So Kate talks about delivery, delivered, or delivery, right? Delivered, or delivery of a document unless otherwise agreed means and shall be effected upon personal receipt of the document by a buyer and seller or their authorized agent. Personal receipt means 1, a copy of the document or as applicable, link to the document in this possession of the party or authorized agent. Regardless of the delivery method used, email, text, or other, a document or a link to that document shall be deemed to be in possession if it is located in the inbox. Interesting, okay? For the parties or authorized agent. An electronic copy of the document or a link to that document has been sent to a designated delivery address specified in the real estate broker section unless otherwise agreed in car form DEDA. After acceptance, agents may change the designated delivery address for the agent by in writing delivered notice of the change designated electronic delivery address to the parties on the car form DEDA. Links could be, for example, Dropbox, Google Drive, or any equivalent program. If a receipt of this link is unable or unwilling to open the link or downloaded the document, otherwise preferred delivery of the document directly, recipient of a link shall notify the sender within 3 days. Okay, so what it says is, because in the past we've had issues, right? People will submit an offer, we'll send an email saying, hey, we sent you the offer, we sent you a counter offer, but we never received it, right? What it says here is based on a couple of elements and how the deliverance of a specific form is. And that means it can be sent out different ways, right? It can be sent out as a traditional email, right? It can be sent on a Google, right, Drive, where it goes into a parameter in the Google Drive, or it can be like a Dropbox, right? All of the documents are in the Dropbox and we submitted it. The question here is, if we don't receive it, right, you need to take action as a proactive agent. And that proactive agent needs to, within 3 days in writing, say, hey, we haven't received it. You can either call, you can either text, or you can email saying, we have not received it. So that way it falls under the compliance of this section of K. Okay. So Steve, come up here real quick and just address your thoughts. Okay.
All right, if I'm going based on reference, then if an offer was accepted on a Friday, okay, again, dealing with deposits are the only part of the contract that references business days. So at that point, if an offer was accepted on Friday, Friday is day 0. Business day 1 is Monday, business day 2 is Tuesday, business day 3 is Wednesday. So the buyer's deposit is due by end of day Wednesday, and in this case, end of business day. All right, because most escrow companies are not open past business hours, traditionally speaking. But per the contract, the contract says 11:59. So if an escrow company happened to have the doors open and if they accepted personal checks, it would still be acceptable within the contractual context of the buyer submitted their funds within the time frame.
Right.
Okay, so at that point, so the escrow time frame is the only portion dealing with the deposit that references business days. Everything else is calendar days. Now, could an agent change calendar days to business days? Sure, they can, if it's then agreeable to the opposite party. Again, everything is negotiable between buyer and seller if it's agreeable to the parties.
Beautiful.
Does that help a little bit?
Yep.
Right.
How can you change that? Is it with an addendum or just literally scratch it?
Either under additional terms and or an addendum. It's not, you traditionally don't see it, but there can be, as an example, if you were to draft in a separate contingency, okay, subject to the buyer submitting certain receiving certain documentation from their accountant or from their attorney, you could end up referencing business days for that contingency. You probably shouldn't from a standpoint. I would probably still use calendar days ultimately, just so you don't confuse the other side. But if you wanted to confuse the other side, go ahead and throw in business days. But yeah, that's you just do it under the additional terms or through an addendum. Is then how you do that. Okay.
Okay,
Thank you, Steve.
okay, the day, 4 days, means calendar days, 4 days, okay. So, to escrow, that means that the first day is considered Monday.
No,
No.
don't confuse. Remember, day zero is the day the offer is accepted. Okay, and it doesn't matter if day zero, the offer is accepted, if that offer was accepted at 6 a.m. or 10 p.m.
Right.
And the reason why that is referred to as day zero is to allow the buyer and or seller to have a full, complete day as day number one. Okay, you may say, well, if the offer was accepted at 7 a.m., they got all day, but from a standpoint of being able to have complete full days, that's why the day of acceptance, whether it's a regular offer without any counter offers, or if a counter offer then was accepted, that is always day zero.
Correct.
Okay, and day one starts the very next day.
So it's second.
Yes, day one is Saturday
Right.
from a counting day
From a,
perspective.
correct.
Yes.
Yeah, and this is why it's important to continue reading these documents, because it could be a little confusing, but once you understand, then you'll understand how the process of the days, calendar days and all that fun stuff. All right, so let's continue for sake of time. Law means any law, code, statute, ordinance, regulations, rules, orders, which adopts by control city, county, and state. Remember, we fall under those parameters depending on where the property is located, right? If your property falls in the city of, let's say Compton, right? You know that the city of Compton has a city inspection report, right? If the property falls in the city of Los Angeles, you know that the city of Los Angeles provides a 9A report, right? So know and understand the area where this particular property is at, and it'll always ask your TC or escrow or the opposing agent as well to make sure that you're following the rules and regulations of that particular city. Yes, sir.
Just to clarify, City of Carson does not.
City of Carson doesn't do any more inspections. Yeah. I know. Legal authorization signer means any individual who has authority to sign for the principal, right? And that's paragraph 33, right? If it's a power of attorney, if it's a trust, if it's a corporate entity, LLC, S Corp, C Corp, and whoever the successor to that trust, or if it's a corporation, who is the entity? Is it a CEO? Is it a member of the corporation? Whoever has the authorization to do so, that's what it means. And otherwise agreed means any agreement in writing signed by both parties and delivered to each. And repairs means any repairs, including pest control, alterations, replacements, modifications, retrofitting of the property provided by under this agreement. And then sign or signed means either handwritten, electronic signature, like DocuSign or e-signature on the original document, copy, or any counterpart, okay? So let me go back to the very beginning of the offers, so that way we can kind of at least chuck away on the important relevant information on the purchase agreement, okay? So here is the first page of the RPA, right? Kind of illustration here, just kind of give you an example. The buyer's information, the address, the city, the county, the zip code, and the APN number. The terms of the purchase agreement specified below. Here's kind of the meat and potatoes of what ultimately the buyer is proposing to the seller, right? And what I like about this, and this happened maybe about 2.5, 3 years ago, is now they have the grid, right? The grid really helps tremendously. Instead of trying to research where it is, the grid provides you with clear, concise language in there, but it also gives you the paragraph where you can reference if you want a little bit more clarity, okay? The next section is talks about the agency disclosures, right? Who is the listing agent? Who is the buyer agent? Is the listing agent also representing the buyer? Would that now create a dual agency? Then you would check the appropriate box. License information. This is your corporate license. And then your individual license would go here. Section D talks about, you know, that potentially competing buyers and seller. This is where the possible representation, more than one buyer and seller would come into play. That can happen, right? You may be representing a buyer in a multiple property, and you may have 2 or 3 buyers, right? So it puts clarity to the buyer saying to full disclosure, hey, I might be working with multiple buyers submitting an offer on the same specific property, right? Again, it's just a full disclosure, and it's already defaulted and checked here. Now we go into what's called the grid, the terms of the purchase and the allocation of costs, right? Here is the beautiful part of it, is kind of the breakdown of the terms, right? What are the terms that the buyer is putting, right? And this is where you need to understand is the conversation with the buyer, you know, based on you know, the listing, you know, how many days the property is on the market, has it been on the market for a very long time, or it just came on the market. You know, you got to know how to maneuver and navigate that conversation, right? Because if a property just came on the market and you're trying to lowball this offer, guess what? Just like I said on that section, right? You're probably going to get your offer rejected, right? Do your due diligence, ask a lot of questions, speak with the listing agent as well, and get a handle of the seller's position, right? The more questions you ask, the better you're informed to really educate the buyer and how to navigate this. Because if the buyer truly wants this property, your job is to wiggle your way to the top to make sure that your offer gets accepted, right? But it's based on all of the meat and potato that's in these grids here, right? And the beautiful thing, everything's just laid out in the first 3 pages, where before it was kind of a little bit scattered, right? And then you had to research and go through it. I love this. This just makes it a whole lot easier. Purchase price, pretty self-explanatory. If it's a cash deal, you'll check off cash. 30-day escrow is your traditional. If you want to be aggressive, you know, if it's a lender, you know, says, how fast do you think we can close this? Well, I think we can close it in 20 days. All right, then go aggressive, right? Because the better the offer looks, the more enticing that the seller may consider or may counter you instead of putting it on a sign, rejecting the offer, right? So all of these elements are very important, right? And it's you on the flip side, right? If you're the listing agent receiving an offer, it's your due diligence to dissect and make sure you're not missing anything, because this can come back to haunt you if you miss something and now it's incorporated, which shouldn't have been incorporated into these terms, right? So this is why you got to check every paragraph. Section C talks about the expiration of the offer. It already defaults to 3 days, and it says 3 calendar days, right? After all buyer signatures, right? So in this instance, let me ask you a question, right? If it says expiration of offer, and we submit an offer on Thursday, and Thursday is considered a 0 days, Friday would be 1, Saturday would be 2, Sunday would be 3. Based on what we talked about the definitions, the expiration of offer, does that mean it's an expired offer on Sunday? Okay, how many people say no?
No.
How many people say yes?
No, no.
How many people say I don't know? What's your thoughts, Steve, on this one?
This day expires on Sunday because it's perform. Okay, it's not a performance day. So
Yeah.
Simon, we can't hear him. Sorry.
I'll answer. Sorry, Steve. So Steve is saying no, that he's saying that Sunday would be the expiration date. So I have to agree with Steve because it is not considered a performance, right? Only performance acts, then yes, it reverts to the next day. In this case, the offer would be considered expired on Sunday at what time?
Midnight.
Oh, look at the contract.
11:59.
11:59.
11:59.
Before midnight.
Because midnight would make it the next day.
This is why I know agents don't follow directions. Look at what the contract
No,
says.
5 p.m. unless they changed it.
5 p.m. exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You
Okay.
see? All right, you all fail. You all fail.
Okay.
We're learning,
Expired.
Simon,
Simon,
okay?
thanks for you.
Yeah. the offer expires at 5 p.m. Other than if you change it, right? If
Okay.
now I change it to 11:59 p.m. And let's see why it's not doing. There you go. Then it alters to 11:59, right? But in this case, as to Steve's point, yeah, it expires on 5 p.m. on Sunday. On Sunday, because this is not considered a performance act. Okay, this is where you got to understand every element. All right, next it talks about the initial deposit, right? Whatever that initial deposit. Any initial deposit, right? Can you put 0 as an initial deposit?
No.
You could, but someone can argue the fact that there was no what? There's no consideration. There is no consideration. So if you put $1 on a 875,000, is that considered a consideration? Absolutely. The buyer has some skin in the game, even if it's $1, and if the seller accepts it, you're good. You're good. And I've seen transactions where $500 deposits. 500. We're dealing right now with an agent that is only putting 1% on a $1.8 million offer. And they're only putting 1%, which is like $18,000. What's up, my man? $18,000. Okay.
Simon,
So
I
it
think,
all really
sorry,
depends. Yes.
I think that's the case in Texas. There's like 1% deposit is what they have to do, right?
Well, it depends here, and again, this is where a savvy listing agent will do their due diligence and look at all of the information, right? If a buyer submits an offer and you're going to ask for proof of funds, do they have enough money to secure a good, strong deposit, right? Because if I have 5 offers, folks, and out of those 5 offers, 3 are putting very low deposit and 2 are putting very strong deposit. Well, I got to look at it from a seller's point of view, right? And taking care of your client's best interest. They're secure because they're putting more skin in the game, right? So if they default and they don't perform and the buyer has released all contingencies, that means that the seller may be able to go up to 3% of damages to go after the buyer's deposit. That's the whole purpose, right? So if an agent doesn't understand this element and portion of it and accepts a $500, right? And now the deal falls apart, and now the seller says, "Well, agent, it's your fault. I want to go and get more money than $500." Well, it's what's already agreed upon, and if it's only $500, that's all you can get. Okay.
Simon,
All
I
right.
have a question.
Yes.
On the
Yes.
initial deposit amount, I never knew that we could make it 5 days or anything, but I don't want to make it that long so that the buyer doesn't change their mind. I want to get the deposit in right away. I mean, what do you think about that?
All right. Yeah, Steve, come up here. All right. Steve can answer this question for you.
Yes, you absolutely can change the time frame as to when deposits are due. And a lot of times when I'm in multiple offers, when I'm the listing agent, I will change that 3 business days. Many times I've even put 1 business day. Okay, in other words, I
Love
want
it.
that buyer,
Love it.
I want that buyer's money in escrow that next business day, and I want them to perform, and I'm prepared to have my seller issue the notice to perform, okay, if in the event. It kind of sets the stage, sets the tone as to how I expect the transaction to go. Okay,
Yeah.
and so
Perfect.
absolutely.
Thank you.
So yes, you can change that.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Steve.
Mhm.
All right. Cool. All right. The increased deposit, that's only if the buyer wants to add additional deposit in a later time frame. So typically, they're selling their home. They're cash poor, but they have substantial equity on their property, but that property hasn't closed. They may go with a small deposit, and eventually, when that property closes and wire the money on their uplake, then they can also include additional increase of deposit, right? So that's
Simon,
where that additional language is in there. Yes.
Another question on releasing a deposit. That's happening lately a lot. They're wanting their deposit released to the sellers quick.
Okay, so meaning what? As part of the counteroffer, buyer to release their deposit?
Yeah, buyer to release their deposit as like guaranteed or just that's how the seller wants it.
As a forfeiture.
Okay, so you know, I mean, we can have a debate over this, right? And I've seen some crazy transactions in the time frame that I've been doing real estate. Yes, there could be language in there that says, after a certain time, buyer will immediately release the deposit to the seller, right? And I've seen that happen where if they're asking for an extension of time, right, to release a loan contingency and says, look, because the seller has no obligation to give you that extension, right? And in good faith, the buyer says, look, if you give us the necessary time to extend that contingency or extend the close of escrow, in good faith, we'll release some of the buyer's deposit. I've seen that happen. As long as both parties are good and they understand the risk factor, right? Because the buyer's not going to be able to get that money back if once it gets released to the seller. It's bye-bye money, okay? Which the intent is there, right? That's the whole purpose of having these agreements and having some type of consideration, which is the deposit. And if the buyer is okay and willing to take that risk with the understanding that if the deal doesn't go through, then it's perfectly fine. It has to be agreed upon. And here's the thing, the biggest one that I see is the agents are so concerned because they don't want to release loan contingency, right? The contract says 17 days, folks. And then after 17 days, you don't release that condition, the seller can send you what's called a notice to perform, and you have to act on that 48 hours. And if you don't, the seller has the right to cancel. So if you're not, and your lender is not 100% sure that they can perform, then don't do so. But two things can happen. You're either going to get canceled on, or you're going to move forward with the potential risk by releasing that to allow you the time to close the deal. That's all. Or the buyer just backs out of the deal and says, look, it's just too risky for me. I don't want to lose $25,000. I'd rather just cancel and move on. And that's fine as well. But the buyer has to be educated on that and know what direction and what decision. And don't fall into this trap where they say, well, Steve, what's your recommendation? Okay. What do you recommend I do here, Steve? What should I do, Steve? Right? I'm not buying the property. This is not for me. This is you. You got to let me know. I don't want to put myself in that position of liability. And I say, do this, and it doesn't go that way. And then you blame me for it. So you need to tell me exactly what you want me to do, and then I'll follow your direction. If that means you don't feel comfortable, I'll do my very best to extend that time. I'll try to negotiate with the listing agent to give us the time, but it's up to you at the very end. Make sense?
Yes,
All right, section.
Thank you so much. It's just the release of deposit is happening on long close of escrows. It's 45 or 60 days. They're wanting to release a deposit. That's what.
And I get it. And sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And I get it. As long as the buyer knows that there's a risk, once that money is released to the seller, that's it. Goodbye. You're not going to be able to say, well, they cancel on us. I wasn't able to perform. I want my money back. Well, good luck with that. Okay. Because the courts are going to see based on the agreement. Well, you knew what you were getting, right, buyer? Yes. You knew that by releasing that money, it's part of the risk factor, right? I can see this going in a different direction and favorable to the seller, not really to the buyer. So I caution you on this, right? But also understand the pros and the cons on this. All right, Section 8 talks about additional financing. If it's seller financing, or they're doing like an 80-20, it's very far and few and rare we see that. Now, I want to make sure that the top number on Section A and the loan amount, okay, so in this case here is a 20% down payment. All and how you do the arithmetic on this is very simple. All right, so you get the purchase price, and if they're putting 5%, 10%, 3.5%, 20% or 50%, you just do the arithmetic and you put the loan amount, and then that number should be able to at the bottom. So the top number needs to also be the same on the purchase price total. If that number is off, then your calculations are off. Either your deposit is off, your loan amount is off, something is off. You need to correct it because the top number and the bottom number on here have to be the same. And then this is the balance of the amount necessary for the buyer to bring into the table. Okay. So based on the purchase price, based on the earnest deposit, based on the loan amount, this is what the buyer would have to come into escrow to make this deal work. And if the arithmetic is off, then you need to refresh it and correct it. All right, the next talks about, and this is the most important, is how we get paid as agents, right, doing our jobs. Now, section G1 talks about seller credit to buyer, right? This is for closing costs only. This has nothing to do with commission. This is closing costs. So if the buyer is requesting the seller for credit, you click here, right? And then you're going to put a specific dollar amount here, whatever that amount is. If the lender says, look, the buyer needs at least 2% of the purchase price, do the math, right? So if 875 is the purchase price and we're asking for 2%, do the math and then put that dollar amount there. Okay. Then that's what you're asking the seller for closing costs. Any additional seller credit, then you would put it here. Does not, again, include buyer broker compensation. Section G3, okay, this is the section that you're requesting. You're requesting the seller for compensation to the buyer's broker, okay? You need to check this, and if you don't check it, you're basically not getting paid. Seller agrees to pay buyer broker out of the transaction proceeds, right, of whatever that amount is, okay? Now, remember, this has to reflect your BRBC, your buyer representation agreement, okay? Meaning that if that number is not this number, then you need to modify it. So if your BRBC says 3%, your purchase agreement in G3 has to be 3%, okay? Now, does that mean that the seller is going to honor the 3% compensation? No. It's a negotiation. This is why all of this transpired last year in August with the National Association of Realtors, why we got into these lawsuits because of cooperating compensation. Most of you remember that back in the day, the listing agreement had two sections, right? Total commission and what we would pay the cooperating broker. And then we also had it on the MLS on the amount. All agents would scroll all the way to the bottom and see, okay, they're paying 2.5%. Okay, they're paying 3%. Okay, that was already stamped and sealed that there was a guarantee of compensation. Now, when you look at the MLS, it's uncertain, right? There is a section that says seller concessions, but a lot of agents leave it blank. And some will put no, some will put yes, okay? Now, concessions can be for many variables, right? Closing costs, buy down of the rate, request of repairs, and also towards the buyer's obligation to pay their agent's compensation. So if that's there, then you know how to maneuver this, okay? I could care less of what the MLS says. You still submit your offer with the opportunity to collect some type of commission, right? The seller has three options here, right? Either accept it, counter it, or reject it, okay? And then based on that, you'll know how to maneuver this, right? If you're gonna, be okay with whatever compensation the seller is willing to pay you, right? Because you may go with 3%, they may come back with 2%, okay? And if you have a 3% with the buyer, then the buyer's on the hook to pay you that difference. And ask the buyer, look, they came back with 2%, we have an agreement at 3%, you got to pay me the difference. And if they have an agreement with you, then they're obligated to come in with additional funds to close the deal, including your compensation. Make sense? Okay. Okay. Verification. Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. So back to the concession, if we put 3% and then say on the buy side, you're helping a buyer, but then the sell side, they say we're gonna give you the 2.5%. Can we then just go back and agree to the 2.5% and that extra half a point Just kind of cancel it out?
Yeah,
And if we
100%.
do, okay, so
Yes.
then we would just add like an additional term to the agreement, or how do we put
Yeah.
that in writing?
Yeah, so if you have a 3% on your buyer representation agreement, right? Let's just say 3.5% is what you're requesting, right? And you have that signed by the buyer. You go now submit an offer and submit a request for 3%, right? The seller comes back and says, I'm only going to pay you 2%. You, as an agent, have the option to either ask the buyer to come in with the difference because you have a signed agreement that the buyer is responsible to pay you. But you also have the option to say, no, look, I'm not going to charge you. I'm okay with the 2%. I'm going to squash that 1%. If that's the case, then you're just going to do a modification of the buyer representation agreement, reducing it from 3% down to 2%. That way it aligns to the terms and agreement, to the offer and the acceptance of the seller. Okay.
Thank
Or you
you.
can also negotiate and says to the buyer and says, look, I cannot reduce 1%, but I'll reduce it 0.5%. You're still on the hook to pay me 0.5% of that commission. And that's okay too. But most buyer agents know their position. They're just grateful and thankful that they have this buyer. So they're willing to accept and consider whatever the seller gives them at the end of the day. Okay. But it's your discretion. You do have an agreement. That's why when you submit an offer, you should already have a BRBC sign and execute it. Don't go showing properties. Don't go submitting offers without that BRBC. Because one, if you don't have it, the buyer is not obligated to pay you any type of compensation. This is why you want to secure. This is why agents get pissed off, because this buyer ends up going in a different direction. And it's like I put time, effort, and energy with this buyer, and now they win and working with another buyer agent. So be very careful. This is why you want to be proactive. Sign those agreements so that way it secures that 3-month agreement. Right? Remember, the BRBC is 3 months. But you can modify that as well and say, I'll work with you 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days. And if you need to extend it, then you extend it. Okay. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
All right, real
Yes,
quick.
thank you.
I know we're going past our time and I appreciate all of you still sticking around. So seller compensation we talked about, the verification of all cash. If it's a cash deal, you have 3 days or you can modify it. Verification of down payment, again, defaults to 3 days. Verification of loan application, is attached. Is it a pre-qualification or a pre-approval or fully underwritten approval? Section 9 is intentionally left blank, and it says there. Section J talks about final verification of condition. What I like is this right here, folks, okay? Do your job, do your homework. And if you want to know a little bit more what verification of final walkthrough means, the VP, go to paragraph 16. And that's going to tell you exactly what that language is. Just like an assignment request, right? 23, it tells you what an assignment request is. Okay. That assignment request defaults, all right, to 17 days. So if a buyer submits a offer, an investor, be very careful, right, and how you counter these agreements, right? That's why they have these blank sections here. Loan 17 days, appraisal 17 days. This section I get a lot of confusion, right? What does this section mean where it says appraisal contingency based upon appraised value at a minimum of purchase? All right, have you ever heard of those escalation clause? Okay, so this is a reverse engineering. What this means is that if the appraised value is less than what the offer we submitted, that the buyer is okay to come in with the difference. So we're telling the seller, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we are okay. If it doesn't appraise at 875, but it appraises at 800, we're still in. But anything less than 800, we're out or we try to renegotiate. So here, let's say if you do put it, you're going to check this section here, and then you're going to put, where the buyer is comfortable. Okay, we'll just say in this case, the buyer is comfortable 800,000, right? So that means that at 875, and between 875 and 800, if the appraisal comes in between that amount, the buyer will come in with the difference. We're hoping that 875 is the appraisal value because that means that the loan is going to be okay. But if anything in between those two numbers, the buyer's still in to come in with the difference. So that means that the buyer, if it appraises at 800, that means an additional 75,000 the buyer would have to come in on top of their 20% down payment plus closing costs. All right. So that's where this particular section talks about. Okay. On the right far, it says contingency removals. If you're releasing loan and appraisal, this is more if it's a cash deal, then the loan contingency is off the radar here. But if it's an appraisal, now let me ask you this question: on a cash deal, do you also need to release your appraisal contingency? You do?
No.
No,
Yeah.
no.
You don't have to.
No.
No, not at all. Because let's just say I'm a cash buyer, I'm going in at 875, but I want to make sure that I'm buying something that is at value. And I,
Yeah.
as a cash deal, don't need to release my appraisal contingency because I might want to get an appraisal because
Right.
that's a negotiation tool. Regardless if there is no loan involved, folks, I can still have that as part of my condition.
Yeah.
Now, most times, buyers that have the cash can care less. They want the property. They'll release it most of the time, but you don't have to on a cash deal. You can save that. You can order an appraisal, and if it appraises, fantastic. If it doesn't, okay, let's get into negotiations. Look, I made a cash offer. It didn't appraise. It appraised at 850. Okay, so I want to negotiate. That's a negotiating tool that you can use. Okay, that's where this comes into play.
I never knew
Investigation
that,
of
Simon.
property.
I never knew that. Thank you for bringing that out. I thought
Yes.
for cash offers, it has to be released. So I'm glad we brought that out.
Yeah. No, it doesn't have to. Investigation of property. This is again 17 days. Informational access to the property. Okay, this is again something that buyers, agents, and listing agents are under the misconception. Buyer's right to access the property for informational purposes is not a contingent, does not create cancellation right, and applies even if contingencies are removed. So let's say that the buyer releases all contingency, okay? Releases all contingency, but they still have 17 days. You cannot tell the buyer, say, hey, you released all your contingencies, therefore you're not allowed to come into the property. No, what this says is for informational access, we will allow you to do what you need to do. The contractor to do estimates, measurements. They're going to knock out walls, and you want to get an idea what that looks like. Then you have to grant them that. You cannot say no to that buyer and that buyer's agent. Now, it also depends because you can counter this from a listing parameter. I can put a counter offer that section L3, right? Investigation of property shall be 5 days. Section L3, informational access to the property shall be 3 days, right? And if the buyer accepts this, then yeah, then that offsets that 17 days down to 3 days. And if they don't release that within that time frame, then the seller has the right to send a notice to perform. And if they don't perform, you have the right to cancel. Just little tricks here and there that you can utilize, okay? Insurance is a big thing right now with everything that's happening in California. 17 days to release that as a condition. Now, from a buyer's point of view, folks, and again, if you need to go, by all means, please do so. I'm not holding you hostage. One thing that I want you to understand is this. That anything and everything here is all negotiable, right? A buyer throws this, the seller receives this, the agent and the seller come to some terms and negotiations, sends out a counteroffer, and then if the buyer agrees to it, if they don't, they can also send a new counteroffer saying, I see your proposal, but I disagree with this, and that. I'm okay with this, and that. And then they'll send out the buyer counteroffer, and that's perfectly fine to do so. It's a ping pong, back and forth until we got an executed agreement, right? That's what it all means. So review of seller document 17 days, title report 17 days, common interest disclosure 17 days, review of lease and liens 17 days, and then possessions is at the time where the buyer is going to take possession. Now, based on this information, it's upon notice of recording. So at the time of official recording, when does the buyer take possession of the property?
Once it's been recorded.
Okay, so let's say that the that the property officially records at 1 p.m.?
Depends what the contract says.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, it records at 1 p.m.
Mhm.
Based on this time of possession, when does the buyer have possession of the property?
After 1 p.m.
Once they're notified that it's been recorded.
6 p.m.
An escrow
Upon,
sends us an email that has been recorded.
okay, you're not reading the contract, folks. Read what the contract says. Upon notice of recordation, meaning what officially records, okay, you can take possession. So if there's a lockbox with the key and you get confirmation of recording at 1 o'clock, the buyer can go there with the buyer's agent and take possession of the property. That's what it means, okay? Or you can say, if checked by 6 p.m., okay? Read the contracts, folks. This is where we have those gaps, okay? I'm testing you. All right, seller occupied. This is if the seller, the SIP, if the seller is planning to stay in possession after close of escrow, if it's at 29 days or less, or if it's 30 days less. Remember, check with the lender and make sure that the lender is okay. The next one is occupant. You know, if a tenant is in possession, if the tenant is planning to stay there, or also a temporary time frame. Seller delivery of documents, 7 days. Sign and return escrow holder is 5 days. Time to pay fees is 3 days. Installation, 7 days. Evidence of authorization and authority, 3 days. And then the last, and I'll leave it at this, is the items included and excluded. What is staying, what is not staying, and then the allocation of costs, right? These are, again, what is the buyer responsibility to pay? What is the seller's responsibility to pay? Everything is all negotiable, folks, okay? Just because it is standard practice that we think that the seller is responsible to pay, it really isn't, okay? The buyer can go in there and pay all of seller's expenses. They can do that. This is where this allocation of costs come into play, right? Traditionally, natural hazard is paid by the seller. Traditionally, smoke detectors, water heater bracing is paid by and done by the seller. Government required point of sales, I get this question quite often, Q5, Q6, and Q7 is what is government required point of sales? Okay, so meaning that whatever that specific city, who is going to initiate the actual requirements to do an inspection? Then if that inspection comes back with any corrective remedies, who is responsible to pay those? I see this quite often. Listing agents and sellers delete this and don't want it as part of the agreement. Either the buyer is responsible or they remove it from this agreement, okay? Some cities do allow to waive it depending on the circumstances. But also be careful, because I've seen where buyers release this without knowing and understanding, and now that particular property is a red flag by the city because of unpermitted modified stuff that was never done correctly, and now the city has flagged it, and in order for them to correct it is going to cost thousands of dollars. They may have to get the permits, they may have to get renderings, blueprints, and submit those to the city, and that could be thousands of dollars as well to correct it, right? So you got to be very, very careful as well. Sometimes they will not allow and give you permits if you want to replace the roof because it did not comply with it originally when the seller did it without any permits. So depending on the circumstances in the city, always, speak with your broker and get guidance to navigate this. And then escrow typically is paid by each pay their own. It's usually, so it's not the 50-50 because the buyer typically gets more fees than the seller. So, that's why they have each to pay their own fees. Title is usually paid by the seller. Lender fees, it's already automatically with the buyer. County, city, HOAs, typically the seller. Any private transfer fees, usually the sellers. Any additional fees or anything that you want to include, it gave you that blank section where you can put buyer to pay, seller to pay, or both to pay. And then the home warranty, right? Who's going to be paying? Typically, the seller pays for a 1-year warranty. And the beautiful thing about it is you can check here and it'll give you all of the different home warranty companies. Do your homework and check what the amount is, because if you put $100, but this policy is $500, then escrow is only going to do a $100, then the buyer would be responsible to come in with the difference. So do your homework and make sure that you know exactly what that amount is. And then the property addendum and advisories, all of the mumbo jumbo here. And that kind of concludes our class today. Any questions that I did not answer or Steve answer that we can address now?
Simon, I have a question. It's Christine.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, I tried to get to it when you were on that part, but I couldn't get in. On the section 34 about entity sellers. Okay, when you have an entity seller, a lot of times, you know, someone will reach out and they see that it's in a trust, so they'll put the trust name, but the buyer's, you know, rep doesn't have any information about it. Like they'll just have the name, like the Smith Family Trust. They don't have the required date or, you know, the other things that are required, and the names to put, like if they're trustees. So this part of the RPA may only have the trust name, right? So it doesn't have all the rest of it. So if I'm the listing agent and I get it, this is my question. If, you know, so we don't have to do the representative capacity, am I allowed, this is a signed document, so this is why I've never done it, but I'm asking, can I go in and if I'm having, say we're accepting the offer, can I fill that part out and put the name and the trustee and the date of the trust? In other words, completely fill out the entity seller, because I'm the listing agent, not the, do you understand my question? Like, I'm not the buyer's agent. The buyer agent sent me this form and it's been signed by the buyer. So it's already been signed. I'm altering a form, even though I'm only just adding that information.
Yeah, and sometimes buyer agents may have wrong information, right? Yes, it happens quite often. Most of it is pulled through, you know, Realist, you know, and when you use your car forms, you can pull data from it and it typically will put in the seller's information, but it may not be accurate. So part of that is making sure that you have a counter offer in place, and that counter offer in place will allow you to clarify these are the sellers. So that way, when escrow receives this, they know exactly who is the entity of the seller and who is the entity of the buyer. Because yes, it happens quite often. Offer gets submitted, but it's wrong information. As a listing agent, yes, you can counter or put something in writing that says this is the correct information that moving forward. So that way the buyer agent knows to modify moving forward with any additional disclosures or documentations.
Okay, but to answer my question, if I wasn't going to counter, say my sellers are going to accept this offer, I need to do an addendum or something, or do the representative capacity. I'm not allowed to touch this document once it's already been signed by the buyers, right? I can't add the extra, like say they have the trust name, but they have something wrong. Okay, that's what I wanted to.
No.
Thank you so much.
Exactly. Okay.
Simon, hi, Susie, quick
Yes.
question, two questions. Number
Yes.
one, my buyer's insisting on putting or assignee on their buyer's name, and I know in the contract, it already states that. You don't need to mention or assignee.
Yeah, so back in the times, it was very common to see John Smith or assignee or ABC Corporation or assignee. You don't have to do that because now they've added that language that says assignment, right? And that assignment allows the buyer the opportunity to assign it to its own entity, okay? Add additional people to the offer or assign it to some other entity, meaning I'm going to sell it now to CBD LLC, right? Now, I want to caution you with all that, and that's a different conversation because there's a lot of wholesalers out there. Their intentions is not really to buy this property. Their intention is to lock it in and then ultimately find an end user to purchase the property and do what's called a double escrow, and now ties up the property, which they never had any intentions to buy it. Now, some are very successful. There's no issue. Things happen. I've bought properties from wholesalers, and I've been on the back end of it because there's still enough spread for me to make this deal work. and ultimately close on the deal. But from a listing point of view, you got to be very careful because they'll drag their feet and not do what they promise, right? This is where you got to really tighten up these conditions and ask a lot of questions. Verify, right? If they're submitting an offer on this corporation, vent them, check them out. Go to the California state website and find out, if they have an active corporation. Also, if this corporation has bought in property under that corporation, you can check on the MLS, type in the corporation, and any real estate that they own, you can verify there. You can check who was the agents that were involved in that transaction. Call the agent. Hey, by the way, this is Simon over at KW. I'm curious, this ABC company, I see that you represent it. Was there any issues, any problems that they wholesale? Oh yeah, we had some problems, this and that, whatever the case may be, right? You're doing your due diligence when it comes to all that. But yes, to answer your question, you don't have to include a signee anymore. Buyers still ask for it just so that it's right there. In my opinion, it helps me to kind of have that light switch that says, okay, there may be an intention here. I better dive deep into the conversation and ask more questions, in my opinion. Okay.
Yes, and also, is that going to be like, is that needs to be during the term of this close of escrow? If it's to 60 days, the assignment has to be done during that time, correct?
No, the assignment has to be done within the time specified on the agreement, which is 17 days default. So after 17 days, you have to release that as a condition. If that buyer now, after that contingency is removed, tries to do it, you can decline and says, no, 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 we're not going to do that. You already released that. Therefore, you're going to close it. Otherwise, we're going to send you the notice to perform and then we're going to cancel on you.
That's
So,
why
yeah,
section K is super important. And if you fill out a RPA, if you are doing it for your own buyer, a lot of times when I'm putting an offer in, I'll put 0 so that they know this isn't being assigned. These are my real buyers. But this I had so much. I've done a lot of assignment things, and the one that the only time I ever had an issue was this last one where it was an all cash 10-day escrow. Didn't change that on the contract, and 4 hours, right, Simon, or whatever, before we're closing escrow, they popped in with this. So, but that's important why those days are there to have that.
absolutely. 100%.
Simon, one
Very
more
good.
question, sorry. It just,
Yeah.
whenever our deadline for the offer deadline, I think on the counter, can we include an extension form? I think there's an extension form that needs to go.
An extension of what?
Of the offer, if it's expired. As a
Yes.
buyer.
Yeah. So I believe that the counter offers have language in there. If the offer does happen to expire, you can revive it. And ultimately, by reviving it, it means that it already expires, but circumstances, situations happen, and the seller was not able to negotiate or respond back on an expired offer. You can definitely revive it. The listing agent can revive it by a counter offer. There's specific language in there that it allows you that even after the expiration, where the counter offer is signed and executed, then that kind of revives the offer that was once an expired offer.
Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Any other questions? All right. Well, that concludes our our contract class. I appreciate you all. Thank you for, staying a little longer than we anticipated. And again, if you have any questions or anything that I can address, please don't hesitate. Just reach out, call me, text me, or email. With that, have a wonderful day and a great weekend, and I'll see you in the next contract class. Thanks, everyone.